so. We have a lot to go over, so I'm going to try to move pretty fast here, but lots of goodies. So we'll start with some things that need to be knocked out. We've had some pushback from different websites that are, using models that are different than ours and are inferior. And one thing that's going to happen, I want you guys to be aware of this, is that people are going to be upset when you tell them the truth about what they are. Even though they say they want that, yeah, that has not proven to be the case. So we've had what we call the Bethany situation. I won't go into details, just use it as sort of like a name for a principle of people who come to learn truth, except when you give it to them, they freak out. So we're going to ignore those people and allow them to freak out and think that pod layer doesn't have the proof of concept that it does. But the situation did annoy me. It made my spirits upset, and so they want me to pick up the pace. So that's the only thing we're happening is we're going to go more speed, full steam ahead, and that means that the original concept was 32,000, but we're shrinking that to 1,000. That's a new plan. Because basically what you need to do is we need to prove that you can read humans in a certain way, and that is reliable and guaranteed. If we can do that with even 2 gender mojos, specifically the hem, her, nages, that narrows down our targets so that we can start marketing to that base, studying that base in temples, and talking about that, and anything we can do for the hem, her, nages storyline, you could then do for any other storyline. So we just need to prove what pod layer can do for one storyline demographic, and there we go. So that's our answer to the Bethanys of the world, is them and the Daryushes and the rest of those kind of people, that we're just going to ignore you and make our bubble show its proof of concept in a way that you cannot. So instead of diffusing our efforts into 32 of those, we're going to concentrate into one. We're going to go with the puncture method of getting one thing that a general brand could do. Let's say a brand that could do a lot of things. You have a lot of engineers or something, so forth, but no one knows who you are. So you pick one product line and you actually devastate the competition with that, and you become known as those people. And then you bring out all the other the lines. So we're going to initially be the hem, her, nages love story service provider. So that's what we're going to be doing. So look forward to that. We're going into the field soon, and that's who we're going to be looking to recruit. The hem, her, nages. That means the male Naiji and the female Nijai. That also happens to be the majority of our demographic on the site as it is now. So we're just going to play to that because that seems to be the way things are going. And then everything else will extrapolate off of that. Look for lexicon. That's something we're working on right now. It's a full lexicon of all the major pod layer terms. There are hundreds of them, so that's taking some time, but I think you'll really like it when it's done. It'll start here in the raw area, and then it'll go down through you guys into the guest area. So if I'm a little slow in doing some of these raw style broadcasts, it's because I'm also doing a lot of lexicon filming at this time. I think you'll be pleased with it. You had an old question, and my memory's crappy, so I thought I answered this question, but maybe I didn't, so I apologize if I just didn't, and if I did. Is about the Xi checks versus the Xi drifts. Speed is not an issue. It's a question of yin energy or yang energy. If I go to my right, I can stay in there for a long time or quick, but my face gets cold, gets tactical. So that's the main thing that makes it a check. It's the yangness of it, which in this case is chilly and loss of mode of expression. As opposed to, for example, Nija, who has Xi, when she goes to her right, fast or quick, it won't matter, there will be a softening or a emotional investment of the face, and so that has a yin quality as opposed to a yang quality. Overall, as far as speed goes, you're going to notice as far as tendency that going to the right tends to be a little faster than the left because those powers actually favor speed as opposed to the structure and long play of the left side. However, both going to the left and going to the right, they get done so fast and so long, you really can't look for that. I would not use that as any kind of, way to tell the difference between Nai and Vi or Xi and Zai. Go with the yin and yang character. Even, for example, Nai Z, who are yang energy all around. When they go to the right, it's a, that's wrong, or that's right. It's an emotional thing where they get emotional resonance, and that is a yin character that comes to their face. although it can look very severe and serious on my 9Z friends. However, it's still yin. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so.
Podler has scientific and spiritual correlates on everything. Because that's how reality is. You can emphasize any point along the spectrum. Thus, there is reading cognitive configuration, mojo, and spirit forms, really all the same thing, but in different terms and with slightly different emphases. There are mojo reading accuracy percentages, such as 80% up to 100% plus. We also use the terms pure sight and true sight, for example, and there are a few other ones as well. Do these have exact correlations to the accuracy percentages, and do they have meanings beyond that? Not just a less clinical, more spiritual nomenclature, but also some implication for the reader's lens? Does that imply more of a focus on reading spirit forms? Can you elaborate on this here or in the broadcast?
Really great question, so I'll try to spend a little bit of time on this one. First of all, the reading of a human is a reading of a human. So, what is a human? A human is the horography, it is biggest way of looking at yourself, and that is the spirit forms. That's the enlightenment elevator. So when you read a person, yes, there is going to be the spirit forms implied. I'll get to how that kind of plays out in a second. But first, the difference between the percentages and the terms such as true sight and pure sight. In Podler, there is the accuracy as a isolated phenomenon, meaning simply how accurate can it be. Then there's a question of usability. So for example, you could say that this way of doing a litmus test is extremely accurate if you're in a laboratory in the middle of nowhere in Idaho. Does that make sense? But not walk around the street. Maybe the general soil in the air would throw it off. You couldn't do that in a normal city. Just the normal, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the percentages mean that you can read it, period. And so what does that mean? It means like a case. So if you had 2 hours of video, plenty of time, we even give you 10 minutes, say that, but you still get to watch it 10 minutes over and over and over again. You can watch as many clips of the celebrities as you want. So that means you can do it. So the accuracy percentage is based on ideal. The other terms are based on being able to pull off certain accuracies under less than ideal, more street, real world. So true sight relates to 85%. But it's 85% under various conditions. So there is increasing in percentages, accuracy, but also you can have stronger and stronger true sight, meaning you can maintain 85% under increasingly distracting or rigorous standards. 85%, as we've mentioned in other broadcasts, I consider to be minimum for something like if I'm going to start thinking about how a person's soul is, I'm going to start thinking about how to run my life, my social alchemies, 85% to me is like minimum. I mean, seriously, I mean, I would consider that to be like minimum for something that important, which, by the way, makes all their models not only obsolete, incompetent. By that standard, I'm actually calling them incompetent because even by their own volition, they won't give over 85%. They won't do it. They shouldn't because they don't have 85%. So 85% we recognize here as being proficient. It means you have true sight. So technically everyone who has 85% does have true sight. The question is, how strong is the true sight? So there's accuracy and strength. So true sight strength level, which is different than accuracy, is the ability to maintain usable mojo reading ability. So probably the first true sight rating would be very, very non-demanding. Simply the ability to keep reading at 85% plus while talking to a room of people. But you don't even have to interact with them. Maybe you just watch them voyeuristically. You have hours, or maybe you can come back as much as you want. So there's not really a demand to make it stressful. It's just simply real world, meaning people move and come and they won't sit there, they won't let you replay them, pause on their face and say, is that an eye drift? So I would say that'd be the very first true sight level, which most people can get pretty close to off the original 85%. Going from being able to read in the TV, if you're allowed to go to, say, a coffee shop and read some behind the counter and they work there for like 4 hours, you can probably do that. So that's a pretty good corollary. However, What about if they don't work behind the counter? What if they actually only there for 30 minutes? And different things like that. So that's that. Pretty much pure sight is a very similar concept, but it relates to 100%. This means that not only can you read with absolute accuracy, you can do that even when things make you dip. So a large part of pure sight, for example, I have pure sight, is recognizing when you don't have 100%, for example. That's a big thing, is having enough knowledge of your spirit and your psyche of, this is a case that's in progress and I'm going to keep letting it go because I don't have it yet. Does that make sense? So pure sight doesn't mean you have to get it right then. Pure sight at its basic level simply means even when you're stressed some or distracted some, you will simply continue letting your brain move and percolate and develop the answer until it gets it. You know what a real answer is, and if the distractions are keeping you from it, you simply keep processing until you get it. You don't get false reads. Does that make sense? Okay. Then there's now a third term which is included, I don't know if I've told you before, which is deep sight. So deep sight is taking the mojo reading to its natural, I won't say conclusion, but its natural continuing pathway, which is you start with the anatomical, but then you start working into the conflagrations. Conflagrations is a fancy way of saying a character. That's what, you know, actors do when they method act. They're taking on a conflagration of mannerisms. A conflagration of mannerisms and attitudes and opinions is a character. So now you start talking spirit forms. Once you start talking about a character, that's really spirit forms, like a mazoot, but it's still spirit forms. Then you start talking about riffing. You start talking about quasi-state of fifth gear. You're getting into spirit forms because you're asking, how's my spirits getting rocked? Because that's what fifth gear is. How are these hitting my spirits? And that's why it's included in there. You really can't get all down to the anatomy and not know that. This is true. If you look at a painting and you are in a bad mood or good mood, you'll see the blues and reds differently. Your brain is actually currently holding different chemistry. So you're looking at those colors in a different state. So that's crucial. So deep sight is related to true sight and pure sight in that it's a strength. That there's like never-ending degrees of. Because technically with true sight and pure sight, there's no end to that. We can keep getting all crazy with little world championships of like, how much distracting crazy stuff can you give someone and still actually have them have like 85% or 100%? But deep sight is how far can they go? So you read someone, you automatically get their mojo. That takes you to third gear. But often as you start getting good at this, you start getting the feel of it, you start getting fourth gear riffs right away. But you'll notice that some people who are mojo readers, and also yourself on individual reads you're doing, that you get more fourth gear riffs than others. Like sometimes like a partial fourth gear riff, or a light one, a shallow one. Other times it's almost like I know that person. Even though I've just met this person through the video now, the fourth gear riff is so strong of another mojo, I feel like I actually have quite a bit of deeply psychological information about this person. So that would be deep sight. That's beyond the percentages, beyond the clarity under stress. So so basically the percentages is just accuracy, and then the true sight and pure sight are being able to do it under stress and distraction. Deep sight is really kind of a different thing a bit, although it is measured in strength, is how deep into a person's psyche can you go. Now, unlike a lot of like the Hollywood style read people's minds, you don't really actually read their thoughts exactly. You read what they're doing, which is a bit differently. So the idea is not to get more detailed, like, what were you thinking Wednesday night? That's not what the point of mojo reading or mind reading would even be. If you want to mind read someone, you're actually doing deep sight, which is going into their deeper and deeper spirit forms to see why they're doing what they're doing. It won't tell you necessarily like where exactly something is, you know what I mean? It's not like that, but it tells you exactly why they're doing it and what they're going to do next as far as why. It will give you phenomenal powers of prediction. So that's one thing as an IG, this is how my kind read, is it gives prediction, but it's not in a vi way. So Aha! So you did eat a turkey sandwich this morning. That's like parlor tricks. Real reading of a person is actually reading what ritual they're currently in. This now start getting to it. This is why it's gonna take a bit of time. Is actually the last question. Is deep sight is why do they hit my why do they hit my fifth gear like this? Almost always the answer to that is a certain mojo in development, yes, but also the ritual they currently are in. Fear, rage, despondency, confusion, all those kind of things, passion, upbeat. Pretty much that's why they hit you like that is so much, is where in the elevator they are, because that will be the major environmental factor as far as energy goes. There's their character, but their character is currently enacting a little mini story, a vignette, which is almost always related to at least one, if not a few, rituals of that enlightenment elevator. So you can almost think that's like sixth gear. I don't know these numbers to be honest. That's what I call it, because you really don't want to call it that after that, because it becomes a very artistic process that you don't want to give names to. Just let what comes to you. But as you go deeper and ask yourself, why did it remind me of that fourth gear riff? Why is it hitting my fifth gear like this? You're pretty much going to immediately get into the story of them, which is usually the ritual, and the character of them, which is their mojo and their development. So there's really a very smooth handoff from mojo, like seeing you anatomically, then seeing that makes you a Nijai, then seeing that makes you a spiffy, heroic, awesome Nijai with good energy who's very happy right now. So that's it's still kind of technical, but I'm starting to talk about you like a character from story. And you're going to let that keep going in deep sight to where you're seeing them as a character in a story, and then you go beyond that to what is the spirit forms behind that's causing this to this story that they're enacting. And you might ask, how can you do that? Well, like I said, it gets a little whiffy sounding, so I'll make sure I explain to you how that's completely possible. I can tell when a Naiji is with their other and when they are not. Now, the four conscious powers are still going to be the only powers that you see. So you may ask, how do you see that they're with their other? You can do this the same way that astronomers figure out where planets are and things like this by warpage of fields, by absences that shouldn't be there of different things. They can do reverse deductive reasoning. Okay, so analogy I think will give a good sense to you is, have you ever seen a dancer who's dancing by themselves, but it's looking like they're dancing with someone else? This has been done in many, many movies, many, many choreographic scenes. I want you to try to imagine this, and I think immediately you'll see what I'm talking about. You can dance with a broom, or just the air, and then remove that. The body of the dancer may look beautiful, amazing, it may knock your socks off. This has been done in a lot of classic films. But however, they don't look like they're dancing with someone else. People may say, oh, he looks like he's really... No, they didn't. Seriously, and they're amazing dancer. I think it was like Gene Kelly or Fred. These are the best dancers who did this. So, no, I know they're amazing dancer, and they look... But they did not look like they're dancing with a real human. No, they didn't. Now, if you really think that, get your eyes checked. Okay, if you took a great dancer and had them actually dance with another human, and then digitally remove that human, that dancer would look like they were dancing with another human, even though you removed it. That's an analogy for your other and the other conscious powers. There are things that a Naiji's face will do that only happens through a surge of Ni. Only when they're getting a lot of Ni. So if you look around the environment and there's no Ni around, they're not even looking at the environment, they're in their head and they're getting this, where is that coming from? That comes from their dance partner, their invisible dance partner. So it's related to how once you know what someone's conscious powers are, you automatically know what the unconscious are, because the math has to go that way or the actual engine wouldn't work. So once I know that you are Ni over Zhai, Z with Vi, that means Nai Ji, Zai V in the unconscious. So that kind of deductive reasoning can go further, and that you actually can figure out what they're actually having as far as a relationship with that part of themselves. Because in the fourth gear riffs, I've often mentioned before, like the MMA fighters. MMA fighters who are Naiji, for example, I can read their body language. Some of them have a much better connection with their other, which actually helps them in fighting, believe it or not, a great deal. They have a looseness. They feel more comfortable in their skin. They feel sexier. They feel more like the hero. They feel like a rock star, and only their other gives that to them. Their face is still doing Nai, NG, Zai Stone Face, V, Warp Frenzy, so that's all the same. But some of them are doing it way better, much higher maneuvers. And those maneuvers that are happening in their face, are happening in their spirit, are only able to happen through that dance dialogue. So, did that help?
That's really awesome.
What about when someone tilts their head to one side, but then is introverting with their eyes to the other? Like that. I see this quite often. I'm wondering if this is a unique cue implying something particular, like using two pod powers at once. So when I tilt to the left, that means I'm in my Nai. If I look at my right, that's Zai. So this stuff here is really related to this kind of motion. For example, in the lexicon I talk about the thrashing and smashing that's done by adaptives versus directives when they get really fired up in energy. If you want to see an example of that, take there's one live performance of like the Magnetic Zeros doing Home, and you really see the two lead singers, the male and female, they're getting really peaked up, and she starts going side to side, he starts going forward and back. So that's because they're going between their subjective discernment to their objective discernment while being hit with their perception corridor. So there's more of a hypnotic movement to people who have good power use of their modulations, is they're actually getting momentum over to here and back, like a surfer who's riding the wave very well. We've mentioned this sort of plane here, like this, a lot of times, but what you're asking is seeing it in a sort of vertical plane. So you can be doing this. This is another way of swaying. Instead of swaying in like this rotationary pattern, it's swaying in place. So this means I'm using Nai perception with Zai. Over here I can be in my Zai. I do this quite often. You'll see a lot of Naiji doing this. I'm in an interview and I'm just leaning on my right. I stay leaned on my right because I feel strong being my Zai tower. And then I look over to my left to get clever answers. Not clever enough to maybe go into little boy dreamy and look weak. I stay on my right. Get my dreamy, come back. Get my dreamy, come back. Other times, dreamy. What about, okay. So I like being the dreamy and I just want to check, check. So this is sort of like 1,000-yard stare. I'm in my Nai and my Zai, but they're kind of even. I can kind of do a 1,000-yard stare in a way with both them by looking to one side and tilting to the other. So I'm in both, I'm in both, I'm in both, I'm in both. So that's what that is. So I think someone asked a question that Jonathan asked about, and it was referring to sort of being a Nai heavy mojo, or Nai heavy Naiji, or Ji heavy Naiji, or Zai heavy, or V heavy. So that's entirely possible, and so that's the first thing you want to do as far as separating them. Now, there's a bit more to it than that, so I think Jonathan just answered like that part of the question, but to start breaking it down, we'll want to go with, yeah, probably 10. So, and most of the people that we'll talk about are going to be some variation of these 10. These are like 10 to kind of like highlight, but most people are a little this, a little that. So we'll start with the 4 that I think Jonathan already mentioned on the forums, which is that a person can favor their Nai, their Ji, their Zai, or their V. There's a 40, 30, 20, 10 sort of ratio, and as long as the ratios are kept with this is first, this is second, this is third, this is fourth, then those numbers can be played with a little bit, so you can have those sort of heaviness. One you'll hear people talking about a lot, I think the interns probably use this term a lot because when I teach them a lot, is if someone is momentum heavy or modulation heavy. So you can have those individual 4 sort of preferences, but then there are people who, for example, prefer Naiji, Nai and Ji noticeably over the Zai and V. So they like the conceptual, they like talking about with their friends, but they don't like zaiing that stuff up, they don't like showing their hand. Another kind is the momentum, the modulation sort of thing. And this, again, that's not to be bad. All these things I'm talking about right now is just a style. These actually are heroic possible styles. So the first four are, so is momentum heavy, so is modulation heavy. Are Naiji who, they have good left use momentum, but they spend a lot of time, maybe their career, their way of life, their upbringing, whatever, being very controlled in their delivery. That's a normal lifestyle of them. And they also, as opposed to just the Zai, they also like to show. So control and demonstrate, and that doesn't have to be bad. That's just another style. Then you actually do have the subjective heavy and the objective heavy. Subjective heavy, this is very common too. So like I mentioned, you can have the Zai heavy, but it's also common for Naiji to have modulation heavy, which is the entire right side. Something that I think was probably relevant to a lot of the Naiji around the board now, who think that they may be like Zai Alpha, is that they're subjective heavy. They actually are a lot with the Nai and the Zai, favoring over the front two. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, it's just a style preference, but it is going to be a person who is, I would call it the voyeuristic Naiji, and you can be a very strong Naiji being a voyeuristic Naiji, but that is sort of a style. Then there are also the objective heavy Naiji. Doesn't mean you're objective, you're still a Naiji. This would be my dad, for example. My mom would be a subjective heavy Naiji, my dad would be an objective heavy, which is favoring the Ji and the V. Still using Nai and Zai to get goodies, but relating heavily to the impact of the environment. Like it being very important how the people dynamics go and the V goes, and as opposed to some other Naiji, a noticeable lack of willingness to want to withdraw from the field. Does that make sense? That doesn't have to be a bad thing. Again, that's a style. Then you're going to have and again, there's a lot of overlap. Those who have a very strong connection with their Daryu, their other, it's probably 12 actually, Kento. The Daryu, their other, the Fumasta, and the Shiny Baby. The Mazout is there also, but that's mainly addressed actually the first 8. The first 8 mentioned are mainly Mazout choices for lifestyle playing. So, about 36. So those are, the 4 powers can be heightened, modulation, momentum, subjective, objective could be heightened, and then there could be a heightened association with the Daryu, the other, the Fumasta, or the Shiny Baby. From those 12, you can be just doing it, and say you're with the other, just doing it's pretty awesome. But still, there is it's there. That connection or that favoritism, that preference is there. But then there are a dozen variations of that for a toxic, unhealthy way of doing it. And then there are another 12 of artistically done, like paragons of that. Like if that's the way you want to like have strong momentum side, that's the way you do it. So I would say there are about 36 of these, the basic 12, and then doing it noticeably bad, because people can actually, for example, have a connection with their other. And they have a connection with their other to where they really are doing it better than other people who have a connection with the other. They should probably teach a class. And then there are people who have a good connection with their other, but it seems a bit sickly, like they've gotten a little checked out from the world in a way that's not healthy, like they maybe aren't understanding what their other is giving to them, so it's an intense connection, but maybe not a healthy or well understood connection. Daryu, which may seem bad, no. Again, it's rough stuff, so that's standard, but you can obviously get really fucked up with it. That's the one that comes to mind easily, that's the other doesn't. But you can also handle rough stuff about as good as you can handle rough stuff. So it could be a Naiji who's very comfortable handling rough stuff. So they have a connection with their Daryu, and it's good. It's a positive one. So all this would be like that. Fumasta, that person really is used to being leader. They're very comfortable in that role as a Naiji. They're used to being the teacher, the leader, the guru. They seem to kind of be a false guru. They seem to kind of be a vampire. They're still with their Fumasta, but they've not gone high enough. It's a sickly false Fumasta. It's a low Fumasta. Or it could be like wow, I want my Fumasta to do training under that Fumasta. So, long story short, there are those 12 variations which kind of build. You have single preferences going into double power preferences, going into spirit form preferences, and then you have standard, toxic, superhero.
Wow. Inspirational mojos are dance partners in a shared story. Can you elaborate on dance partner mode, which is a term you use often, specifically with reference to the ninjas? What do ideal ninjas dance partners look like, accomplishing the great feats ninjas are known for?
Okay, well that's very, very, again, a complex question, and we're going to get that deeply away with the following thing, which is the high stakes races. But to sort of like set the scene a bit for that is, as far as the dance partner, we'll focus on the actual Nijai character there. But a good dance partner knows the dance steps, is constantly learning new dance steps, is updating the known dance steps to be better than the last time, is aware of when dances are coming up, and boots up the appropriate energy, which has a lot to do with advanced peak pathways, that more energetic way. It's more demanding, but allows you to kind of like gear your character up big time. So those are the big five of what it takes to be a good dance partner. So for example, as an IG, I need to be aware that there is a dance with Nijai. That's important, because if you're not aware of that, you don't actually see yourself in that way. For example, if you are a dancer and you're dancing, just like a grappler, when you get off the mat, there's instinctual, how did it go? How could I use that to do better next time? But most people don't do that with most of life, and they should. Mode reading should actually help with that, and should begin with your storyline, because when you're talking to yourself in your head, that's how it starts, and then a real life representation of that. You really need to know how to dance with that, and if you don't see the value in that, really go back to remedial school, because it's in your own head. You're learning how to dialogue with yourself. So you can do it well or not well. So it brings in, there is a dance, and it's going on all the time. So how well am I doing it? So then that brings the next part, which is, well, what makes the dance? How do I know it's happening? Because good dance partners start by dancing on the stage some, but it's rehearsal also, which gets to the part about always learning new moves. Dance partners that move forward and other dance partners don't learn moves too, then it becomes a problem. Then it's dead weight. You're no longer a dancer, you're dead weight. Basically, long story short, you're either, that's what I'm saying, that's why you have to recognize that you are a dancer, that other storyline, because then you are a dancer or you're dead weight. If you're on a dance floor with your dance partner, you're either dancing or you're dead weight, right? That's all there is. Why else are you out there? You should be dancing with your dance partner. Okay, so most dance partners, their relationship doesn't have to be lovers necessarily, but it tends to start extending beyond just the dance floor and beyond rehearsal into their dialogue, their banter, the way they have lunch together, all these different things, because they start realizing it's all one dance. And the dance we do for the judges, say in 3 months, is really just an apex of the dance that we do all day long, all year long. Does that make sense? So it's acceptance of that. Then there is when your partner moves differently. You instantly recognize, she wants to dance. Then you need to be ready. If you're with your partner, be ready to dance. If you're not, you need to actually go take a time out and go to your inner psychic gym and do what you gotta do. Rest, work out, do whatever, get yourself calibrated. But when you're with your partner, there is an assumed obligation, because they're another enactor of your storyline. So what happens to them directly applies to you and how heroic you are. You can't get around that. So when the dance partner looks like they're ready to dance, or the world comes to them and sort of forces a dance on them, you, boom, are there. You anticipate that and are eager. That's a big one. To be dancer, not dead weight, there has to be an eagerness to jump into the fray, whatever that may be, for your dance partner. There's not, oh, the song is starting, or, oh, people are watching us. No, there's a, cool, they're gonna watch us dance. So that's the thing. So no shame is a big part, because if you feel shame in your dance, then you automatically are going to make your partner feel shame. There's almost no way for a Nijai female to feel shame in their dance and not make it affect me. I almost feel compelled to up my heroicness to kind of break them out of that spell, because that's literally half of my storyline acting out. So if I let a tragic part of that enact, it's almost like that's happening to me. It's like a spell. So, and that's for everyone. When I see an IG who is dancing well, I nod my head inside. When I see an IG who's not dancing well, I turn my nose up and I say, I'm not like that. And that's important. So, there can be, for example, an IG who does a lot of believe that they're completely isolated and they dance by themselves. You know what I mean? But that's just not the case. And I can tell you, because I'm really, really don't like most people, but it does count. There are people that are part of your storyline, and particularly the inspirational other. Because you can't, if you're an IG in the woods, you're still with that one. There's no way of outrunning that. So there's no outrunning the dance partner relationship. Did that help?
Yes, thank you. Okay. I wasn't as experientially aware of the night reboot until recently, as I normally wake up feeling incorrectly, as though I am in the same state I've been going to bed in. Lots of tension lately. But this morning it was different. I woke up feeling extremely peaceful and relaxed, as if my systems had done an automatic reboot while communing with my spirits while I was away from the world. Then suddenly I realized where I was, and it was like a seizure of tension gripped my body, as if I was jolted into something, in parentheses, welcome to NI users, hourly, or I should say secondly, reality. This is not a bad thing because it raised my awareness that this is going on. Jai users especially hold a lot of tension in their bodies and can get used to it so that it feels normal, like a fish is used to swimming in water, except in this analogy the water would be toxic. It seems like a good starting point to delay the interval between the peacefulness of the quasi-state and psychic equilibrium and the mazout we jump into in the morning. That's what it felt like.
Yes,
just
absolutely.
Mazout coming on me. I feel like I can train to keep this quasi-state longer and longer each day before allowing other forces to impose themselves automatically without my awareness or control over them.
Absolutely. So I'll touch on briefly. Two things are, one, that quasi-state, both the quasi-state, is a very important concept and place within yourself to start becoming aware and comfortable with. And one of the best ways to train that, we've always said is mojo reading, but I'd say mojo reading is probably the second. The first thing I would teach someone, because I'd probably teach people about spirit forms first if I had a potential community, is quasi-state. And the way that you would get them to recognize that is before going to bed and before coming out of that sort of twilight state. So the twilight state, going to sleep, coming out, is trying to elongate that and take pleasure in the sensation of it and also the headspace. Because you have a different headspace at that moment, and so that's something that when you get to mojo reading, which is next, is very relevant to the fifth gear quasi-state, is to really be a great reader, you kind of want to get into that twilight state, that quasi-state, while standing looking at something, which is why when you first start learning mojo reading, you don't want to put a lot of stress on yourself, because it trains you to not use quasi-state. You want to start actually doing it by a voyeuristic method of watching a screen, so you can get used to getting the quasi-state as your natural way of getting the best reading. And then, like true sight and pure sight, work on being able to maintain that kind of state even when you're in the field. Because you're kind of like an archer. There's a headspace you get into to be in the zone. You learn that by yourself. You learn that in the woods. You learn that over repetitions in your room, all these kinds of things. So that when you're out with distractions, you can go to that headspace, which will be more difficult to get at that moment. So you learn it with as little static as possible. The least staticky area people have is when they are just detaching from their mazout before they go to bed and right after they come out from being asleep and they're going to reattach. You can notice that very different altered state and try to stay with it, and it will stay longer the more you do that. And that is something you want to reach for when you're mojo reading. Especially if you're reading blah 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 blah, you're going really quick, it's no problem, but then there's like, this one's gonna be a little problem. Whenever I do that, you notice I do this, I just kind of like detach. That's what I'm doing. If I ever have a problem with someone, I know I have to go in quasi, I have to go to fifth gear. That's always the way to answer the problem is, I need to just not be here while still having eyes. And that's a special headspace you kind of get when you're going to bed and coming out. The last part is what's happening. The reason is, you are absolutely correct, the hours of sleep are a ton of peaking and spirit forming that's happening sort of autonomously while you the apparatus, are taking a time out. So you're kind of resting, but actually what's going on here, they are not resting. In fact, they're doing a lot of healing and they're doing a lot of upgrading and they're giving you a lot of new information. So clamping on the mazout right away is disrespecting that. You want to elongate the twilight period in the morning so that you show that you recognize that your spirits and your Sanamia were doing stuff during the night, and you want to notice what new info you have, because you will have new information and new perspective and new position. Your perspective and position will be better. It may even seem worse. You may even wake up like, I have to do this, it's an emergency, but maybe that's what you need to know. What it simply means is you wake up further along. You are further than before as far as the percolation. You can aid that by going to bed anticipating it. So you don't just, and then the mazout kind of comes out, that comes off. You want to actually say, I want to feel the twilight, the quasi-state before I go to sleep. I want to notice that I'm doing that. So that once I'm in the twilight state, the quasi-state, I can say, and only in that state, I want the spirits to give me their love and help during the night. Saying that with the mazout still on you, first of all, stupid. No, it's not. That's second. That's stupid. But first of all, it's disrespectful. Why if you want to come to them, you have to come to them in the proper state to say that you are there to ask help from them, which means you need to talk to them in their language. So you need to step out of mazout into the quasi so they can talk to you easier. So if you want to have, for example, I have really bad dreams a lot of times, but I'm able to make them not as bad as they could be, and I've had to, because they can be kind of rough for me, by asking for whatever help I can get before going to bed. So as I'm going to the quasi-state, I basically am asking, I know that there's going to be a spirit maelstrom as I go in tonight. I call out to my higher spirits to take me there, although I'm not here consciously. I want to set my intention that when I'm in these adventures, when I'm being thrown about, I want to do the heroic thing. I ask for help in doing that. And I know that you love me, so I know you will. That will do a lot to make the percolation that was going to happen automatically, you felt waking up, be much better. And the ability to connect and wake in the morning will be much better because you made that intention. So. Yeah, she sent me an article on Mike Tyson, who has sort of found some inner peace through raising pigeons and sort of getting his spirit forming through them. Some people may laugh at that, but I would recommend that you do not. In fact, I would have to insist that you don't, because that to me seems like shiny baby. The shiny baby spirit form is very often felt in an animal form because it's almost like too pure for humans. Do you mean? So usually it's in the form of a child, but often sometimes it wants to be even purer than that. It wants to be something that can't be tainted. So oftentimes pets strongly get shiny baby spirit forms put on them by humans. Because as you saw last night, that ex-Amish thing, the dog knew how to treat a human better than humans did. So there's a reason why oftentimes the shiny baby is put onto animals, because they hold that spirit form better. They do a good job. So the reason I mention this is because what I'm asking you guys to do is a difficult thing. Learning how to read Mojo is along with personal development. And although I am very advanced, I must constantly develop myself. And I must share that with you, because otherwise what I'm doing may seem separate from what you're doing, and it's not. I go through these daily issues of having hard spirit forming sessions that I get scared of and don't want to do. I have Mojo readings that throw me and I get confused, and so I have to work through them just like you do. So I want to share one with you right now, which is Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson is an IG, and I really didn't want to accept that because I didn't like Mike Tyson at all. I thought very little of his conduct and the way he comported himself and the way he uses his tremendous talents and energies and ferocity. I thought it was bullyish. I didn't like it. I hate bullies. So when we were reading Mike Tyson, and we found the as an IG, but I placed him in several other categories first, trying to like hang him in there and see if that would like fit. If it would like, if he stayed in that like will it fit? He never did. So I got moving him around, seeing if that other one would fit. No, that doesn't fit either. And it was so obvious what he was. It happens to me too. I mentioned before, it's usually not the technical stuff, not once you get really good. Once you get really good, whenever you aren't seeing something, it almost always has to do with spirit forming. And I consider that to be a very ugly form of Naiji that I've seen quite a bit of in my life, which is the extremely viscerally aggressive. I've seen a lot of different kinds of Naiji, psychologically bully as well, but that kind is one of the reasons I learned to fight myself, is because it's a way of mind-jogging people that actually seems unheroic and pointless and should be stopped. So, it sounds weird, but this is why I didn't want to be a Naiji. Making him a Naiji was almost like giving him some kind of validation as a human that I just didn't want to give him. Maybe it makes me sound like a bad person, but I didn't. I'm telling you my truth that these are raw filmings. I didn't want to accept that. I didn't want to accept that that was one of my kind. So I eventually did, because truth is truth, but I still don't like it. It was a sore spot for me. So this actually helped me, and I'm so glad that Christina sent this to me. I think because she realized it was a sore spot for me, that he seems like he's learning, and he is letting his true bravery show. Because I think Mike Tyson's actually a very brave person for the life he's led and having to get through what he's done, but I think now this is more brave, actually showing his deeper part, the vulnerable part of him that made him be so ferocious before. And so I think more of him now. I was very moved by this, and the feelings he feels towards these pigeons and the spirit forming it evokes in him. I changed my opinion about how I feel about him being one of my kind. So I hope he keeps going, and this helped me learn too. There are two strategies that we'll be using for the rollout. I mentioned one, which is the puncture. That's a well-known strategy, which is you need to put all your energies into an extremely aggressive campaign that you can win. It helps you puncture when there's no room for you. This is where Ni Alpha excel, but I don't want you to think it's our only approach, because we're doing all mojos, but particularly we're doing all first wave. So the Ni Alpha do what's called demassification. So these two strategies I want you guys to kind of learn about, especially those who want to become interns and get involved deeply, is because especially first wave, the puncture principle and the demassification principle are the main ones. So the Ni Alpha favor picking a superiority that you have over, basically it's like business plan 101. You see how there's a problem, how people are addressing it, and you point out how it's wrong, it's ineffective, it's obsolete, whatever, and then you drill them. And you make so that no one can back you down, that a new brand is servicing that client in that way better. So it's small, it's extremely single-minded, but it puts up a tent pole. They can't be knocked down. But tents need to be big. So you can almost think of like the vast canvas of the tent as the knee, which is the demassification, which is trying to get as much under an umbrella as possible. So big tent would be, you know, the first wave. Get the largest single puncture you can get, and then the broadest. So what demassification is, it's a concept often used with, like, say, internet and so forth, of getting any interest you can. Even if it's just casual interest, or clicking on your internet, or buying a magazine that gets shipped to them overseas, they're really just getting a tiny little thing. But once that happens, you can start to pool that widely spread out energy into actually market share positions. So it's very effective. So both the tentpole puncture and the demassification are the best for getting things started out of nothing. So one kind of pierces through what's already there and makes a hole. The other one stretches over all the bubbles and pulls out what is useful from their bubbles, kind of siphons it and brings it into a bubble and makes it to be. So they kind of work beautifully together. My spirits came with a little poem recently. My Fumasi gave it to me, which the people I've told so far have liked, so I'll give it to you. It's a Naiji poem. It goes something like this. I am Naiji and I go everywhere. I am Naiji and I go every when. I am a submariner and I go deep. I am a voyager and I go far. I am an aviator and I go high. I am a cosmonaut and I go and I go and go. I am Naiji and I go everywhere and every when, to the edges in between, to the vistas, mind unseen. We are Naiji, etc., etc. So if I had a group of Naiji with me, even one, there would be a second refrain of that where we do it together. So anyway, I hope you all enjoy that. It felt good to share that with you. I'll throw one last Warp Frenzy in here because people seem to really find that interesting. This is a cartoon. Is the movie Fire and Ice. Awesome movie. There's the characters in there. I think probably the main male and female are probably Genez. I think it's a Gina and a Janie. But there's another character who's also a third main character, which a lot of people's favorite character, Dark Wolf, who's almost certainly Naiji. So there's kind of like an evil Naiji who's like the sorcerer. And earlier on, the Genai actually gets close enough to finally kill this fucker who's been causing all these problems. Because his mind's so powerful that he basically makes snow move like an avalanche. And he just runs towns over. If you don't get what he wants, he just runs you over with snow and buries you. So, you know, at one point, one of the heroes halfway through the movie actually manages to work his way in and see him, and he's like, finally, I'm gonna kill this bastard. And the guy's kind of scrawny, so he's like, good, he'll at least be easy to kill. No, because he has mind powers, and when the guy tries to attack him, he can't. He gets like he's walking through this invisible field, like the guy's mind, and it's like waves are so heavy that he can't, and eventually just gets beaten down, and he just is exhausted, and his body gives out. So you're like, damn it. But in the end, there's the final battle, and Dark Wolf manages to make his way into this guy, and the guy does the same thing, and it looks like it might work too, but no, my boy pulls out Warp Frenzy, and he wills himself through that guy's will, and he hacks him up. So, anyway, great movie. I hope you enjoy it. It actually has a lot of artistic concepts that come from my man, Frank Frazetta, so that automatically gives it a gold star. I think it's good for that, and I think we're signing off. So.
Very awesome.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.